everyone to the fourth session of the 2023 Volunteer Engagement Series. My name is Sydney Shutro. I am the Director of Volunteer Engagement at the Tennessee Commission on Aging and Disability. I want to thank you all again for supporting me in this ongoing training opportunity and for everyone who gives me feedback every month on ways to continue to improve the series. I encourage you all to do that and reach out to me anytime that you have suggestions or what you would like to see, or even let me know some of the takeaways that you get from our sessions every month. For anyone new to the series, we have all of our presentations from 2020 through last month on the Tennessee Commission on Aging and Disabilities YouTube channel. And by the end of the day tomorrow, we'll have this video recording up there as well. I will also have a follow-up email to everyone who registered with the session resources by tomorrow at the latest also. I want to do my typical disclaimer that these webinars are being recorded, so please be sure when we have discussions to keep information confidential when talking about volunteers, clients, partners in the community, kind of keeping that general, not super specific. Please be sure to put yourself on mute to reduce the background noise for our speaker. Now is the time to turn off your camera unless you want your face recorded. Totally up to you, to each their own. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please type those into the chat box and we'll address those as quickly as we can. And I do want to try something new this session that we haven't tried before. So in Teams, you have things called reactions, or ways you can react. And I want to try that. So as we're going through the presentation, if you hear something that you like, you can give a thumbs up, or something funny, you can laugh. So usually it's at the top of everyone's screen, next to usually where it says chat or people, raise your hand. Click that reaction button and you have a thumbs up, a heart, an applause, a laughter, and a surprise. So if everyone could click one of those reactions for me, let's see what happens. There we go. Awesome, everybody knows where that's at. So as Kathy's going through her presentation and as we have future sessions, I think this is a fun way to keep everyone engaged and let the presenter know that, they're doing a good job or they said something interesting, because we've all had the presentations where it's like, are people paying attention? So I think this will be a fun way to help do that. It's also important to remember that everything we talk about on these webinars is not required for you to implement in your program. These are simply best practices through research and experience. However, I know we're going to hear some really great tips and tricks from Kathy. So if you hear something that you want to implement, like a suggestion or a strategy, be sure that you have your support of your supervisor or management before you move forward. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Kathy Snell to introduce herself and start our discussion on Board of Director Recruitment and Retention. Kathy, thank you so much for agreeing to speak with our group. We're excited that you're here with us today.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. First, I'd like to thank Sydney and the Tennessee Commission on Aging and Disability for having me on today. Thank you to all of you for coming and being a part of this as well. Today, we'll be talking about board recruitment and retention. It's a pleasure for me to be able to share some of what I've learned throughout my work with boards and committees. I'll give you kind of a little bit about me. I've been in volunteer and event management for a little over 20 years. I started my career with the volunteers in a hospital setting, and then it just kind of continued throughout everything I do. With events, we all need volunteers, and it just kind of continued from there. As you can see, over my career, I've been in numerous positions where I've not only worked with volunteers and boards, but like many of you, I'm sure, I've been in those shoes as well. I've been a volunteer, I've been a board member, I've sat on committees. Those experiences have taught me many things over the years, as I'm sure they have for you also. Not all of those were good experiences. I have used the ones that were not good experiences to highlight what I would have wanted those to maybe have looked like a little bit differently, or what I got out of it. And I take that with me as I move into a new role and truly utilize how I felt in those situations to try and better what we're doing for other people wanting to be a part of our organizations and volunteer teams and boards. Everyone joined the webinar today for a specific reason. I'm guessing it's one of two reasons. Either you don't currently have a board and you're looking to start one, or you don't like where your board is currently at. Either the board work has become stagnant or the board members are no longer engaged, or maybe it's both. Sometimes we get caught up in meetings and meet without a purpose because our policies and bylaws tell us that we have to. Those are the meetings that will eventually have your board members walking away or becoming disengaged. Sometimes our board members need a refresher of what the expectations are of being on your board and what goals you are trying to achieve. Regardless of the reason, we first need to take a look at the board you have or the board you want. Well, you may not have expected to have a lesson on board structure today. That is kind of where we're going to start. It really is the basis of how you're going to look at recruitment and retention is by kind of evaluating where your board's at or what type of board you're looking at having in the future. We'll talk about determining board purpose, defining goals and expectations, and then developing an ideal candidate list. I promise you we'll come back to the recruitment and intention and why these things are important. There are several types of boards, and it'll be up to you to determine kind of which one fits your organization. There's boards of directors, governing boards, fiduciary and advisory boards, fundraising boards, managing and working boards. You want to determine the purpose of your board because that really is the why to all of it. Why do you need a board? Why do you have a board? What is the purpose of that board? I just want you to take a minute as we kind of walk through these and think about what type of board you have and what is the purpose of the board that you're creating. So board of directors, we look at as they kind of oversee all the activities and establish a mission, strategy, and goal. When we look at governing boards, they provide strategic direction, oversee financial health and sustainability, and ensure that everybody's complying with bylaws, articles of incorporation, those types of things. We have advisory boards that advise and recommend actions. You have fiduciary or fundraising boards that ensure that the funding is available to sustain your operations. And there's managing and working boards. Those typically are for smaller nonprofits that really don't have the ability to maybe hire paid staff, so that those boards typically run the day-to-day operations. So as I said, kind of think about the board that you have. Every organization's board, it may look a little bit different. This is an example of kind of a board that I was a part of. This was an advisory board that worked with a local senior center. Their purpose was really to recommend actions to the senior center manager and staff. This included providing advice on the structure and programming and outreach that would benefit the seniors and overall community. That makeup was a variety of seniors from the community as well as business representatives. As you can see, they had a couple of different committees. I didn't put all of them on there, but just a few of them was a governance committee and a funding committee. They then had subcommittees. Those subcommittees were the ones that kind of took pieces and parts of that board and looked things over and did things individually with each of those groups. They also had a health and programming committee that would provide information and structure to the programming that was happening at the senior center and how they would extend that out into the community, try and encourage others to come into the center. Another board that I worked with had a very different structure. Their purpose was mainly focused on fundraising. They ran a gift shop, they ran on-site sales, other fundraising activities, and then they kind of oversaw the volunteer membership. So they worked a little bit closely with the staff in regard to recruitment efforts for volunteers. Want your board to look like? All those boards have a purpose that should be defined within an article of incorporations, bylaws and term limits, policy manual, board member roles and descriptions, and committee charters. Over time, the boards should also be considering to do a strategic plan and budget and to assist keeping your board on track and moving forward. Without those pieces, it's really easy for a board to lose its way. When board members see that the group they are joining has a purpose and that you're working on all of these things, it speaks volumes. It shows that people involved with your board are serious about the work that's being done. If your board is structured well and you have a mission and you're providing those guidelines to those who are coming onto your boards, it shows that you're taking that work very seriously. And if you're not, why would anybody else? So just as important as the structure of the board is that action of setting goals and expectations. If you've done your work, creating and outlining that structure and highlighting the roles and descriptions, many of the expectations there should already be in place. Be sure to outline the responsibilities in the descriptions as well as how those will be carried out. You'll want to create goals for the board to be sure to include measurable outcomes. Without that, you'll be left with board members really not being sure of what they should be doing or the reason for being there. Just like in our own jobs, those individuals are looking for validation. They're joining a part of your board and they want to be there, hopefully for a purpose, right? We want to have them there so that they can help us meet our missions to achieve our goals. If you've done all of these things, again, most of those things should already be in place. Without knowing what they're trying to achieve, there's no way of them knowing if they're being successful in their board role. I don't know about anyone else, but how many of you, and you can show, as Sydney had said earlier, kind of show with a raise of the hand, how many of you have been a part of a board and didn't really know what your purpose there was? So we have a few. I'll kind of share a little experience that I had as well at one point, and that'll speak to it as well. But we all want to do well when we're on those boards. We all want to participate, and we all want to know if we're helping the organization achieve their goals, their mission. That kind of brings us to developing an ideal candidate list. So think for a minute for those that currently have boards. Think about the board members that you currently have on your teams. Think about what role they play on your board, maybe what brought them there, and whether or not you feel either you or they aren't really sure about the place that they're in on your board. If you're in the process of recruiting board members to replace outgoing members or to build a new board, all of those questions are very important. Creating an ideal candidate list isn't just writing some names down on a piece of paper, looking for your friends or family who said they would help you achieve, filling your board. It's really about creating a list of characteristics, skills, and professions that will help you meet those goals. We're not looking for warm bodies to fill seats. I encourage you to have a committee made of your board members, staff, and maybe a couple of individuals that benefit from your services to be a part of a committee to recruit people for your board. And once you put together that list of characteristics, skills, and professions, you should really look to those members on that committee and find out who they might know in the community. Who might they know who are looking for opportunities to fulfill a role. Don't be afraid to conduct an interview and to choose the candidate that's the best fit for you. Sometimes we get to this position where we just want to fill seats. But in reality, that isn't helping any of us. The candidates that you select should be passionate about your mission and the work that you do. They should be willing to participate in not just monthly or quarterly meetings, but in fundraisers and other events that you're hosting. They should have skills and connections that will help you in your mission and be willing to use those connections. I'm going to ask kind of for a raise of hands again. How many of you have board members that simply want to be on the board because it looks good on a resume, or they want to be on that board, but then when it comes time to actually touching base with their connections, it's a little wishy-washy? I see a lot of hands going up. We want to make sure that they have that. I'm sorry for. You also want to make sure that when you're looking for those board members, that they're matching what you're looking to do. You want, if you're looking at, we talked about looking at your board and considering who's on your board currently and what their role is. Try and help them figure out how can they help you better. For example, if you have a fundraising board, it'd be great to have somebody with a financial background. If you're looking at doing something with governance, perhaps an attorney or a school teacher or somebody who's kind of more into the reading and pulling pieces and articles and things like that together. So you really want to, when you get those recruitments in, you really want to look for the individuals and match them with the area that's best suited for them. If I come on to a fundraising board and in fact, I've never done a fundraiser and I'm not comfortable asking people to, give money or donate items, it's probably not the right board for me. And those volunteer board members need to be engaged in what you're doing. You need to question whether or not your board members are contributing. Maybe you have an annual appeal and it's a financial contribution that you're looking for. Or perhaps in lieu of financial contributions, you ask them to donate a number of volunteer hours. It's important that they are doing those things. Because if as a board member, I'm not willing to support the organization that I'm working with in those ways, how can I as a board member promote anyone else doing the same thing? Be sure that and I spelled development wrong, sorry. as you develop an orientation for your new members, these are important pieces as well. As you bring on those new recruits, you want to have an orientation process in place. You want to provide them with materials and basic information about your organization, but it's also a really great idea to provide them with a mentor who's already on the board and who would be willing to kind of show them the ropes, answer questions for them, and maybe meet up with them 1 or 2 times in the first 6 months of them being on the board to just kind of help get them acclimated to what is the mission and the goals and what are we looking to achieve with our board members. Again, that's going to look very different depending on what type of board you have working in your organization. And then always be sure to go through those expectations with them. Job descriptions, expectations, and goals of the board members that you are putting into place. By having the conversations about the expectations and things, you're actually letting them know what you're hoping that they can contribute to your organization as well. And as we talked about before, just to reiterate, we all want to do a good job when we get on those committees. We all want to have a purpose there. If you've done all, if you've started working on all of those parts and pieces that we talked about before, the articles of incorporation, bylaws, board roles and responsibilities, if you've done those things, even though it's a lot of work, and it should be, you then have the responsibility of cultivating an environment that those board members want to be a part of and support. So if you've done all of that work and you've gotten these individuals on board, the next piece of that retention of your board members, that should be the easy part. At that point, when you've matched their skills, when you've found those individuals that you've recruited, it's really at that point where we want to utilize their skills and talents. The biggest piece to retention is if their experience has not been meaningful, they will not stay and they will not recommend your board to anybody else. And having a recommendation from a previous board member that can go and encourage other people to become a part of your board is one of the biggest ways that you can spread the message of recruiting for your board. How many of you have heard of organizations that you just, somebody has had a bad experience with and they're just not going back, and they're going to tell everybody they know, do not get involved with that. I don't know if you want to be there. It's not a really well-run organization. So again, some different hands going up. We've all had those situations, and you can say that with customer service as well. No matter where you go, those bad experiences tend to be the ones that you share the most. So once you've established the skills that you're looking for, and you've recruited those individuals, and they're passionate about what they're doing and what their mission is, and they understand what being a part of your board means, that it's not just showing up for a board meeting, but truly being engaged in the work in order to achieve the organizational goals, it's then your responsibility to keep them engaged. And that's where on our slide you see spice it up. I'm talking about the board meetings. Meetings are a necessity, but what you choose to do during those meetings will make or break your board. Change things up. Include reports that tell stories, not just sheets and numbers and tallies. Share stories and celebrate successes. Have meaningful discussions. Use their ideas, if possible, of course. And please don't ever say, "We've tried that before." That is a huge turnoff for people. In reality, even tweaking that thought a little bit can change the outcome. But when you say, "We've already tried that," to a board member that's new and fresh and trying to give you new ideas, that's a great way to shut them down. Bring in speakers or offer other types of trainings. Host a retreat for your board members. And show your gratitude. Something as simple as an email or a written thank you is huge. Use social media to highlight their efforts for everyone to see. During Volunteer Week, solicit an ad in a local paper thanking them for their service. All of those take very little effort and time. We've spent a lot of time talking about the structure and makeup of boards. While this may not tell you how or where to recruit board members, the purpose is to establish your organization as a place individuals want to support and be a part of. The how and where you recruit will be different for everyone, By creating your list of ideal candidates, you will have to determine the best way to reach those individuals for your organization. Retaining your board members is about the work that you put in. Keeping your board engaged will benefit you and make them want to stay. If their experience with you is good, word of mouth, again, will be your biggest tool for recruitment moving forward. Although you want your board members to stay, sometimes letting them go will lead you to a better fit later. Sometimes you have to wait a little bit for that. But by keeping somebody in place to have a seat filled, just to have them there, speaks can really negatively impact a group's enthusiasm. It's easy for people to get dragged down by one individual. How many of you know what I'm talking about by that one individual that's on your board and that can so quickly turn things negative? I think we've all been there. We've all seen that happen. So, as I stated, sometimes it's easier to let them go when the time is right. Gracefully when it's time. I've been in this position. I was kept on a board to fill a seat when both I and the board knew I was no longer a good fit. I felt like a failure, and I felt like others felt like that too for me. When it was truly that time and I did walk away, they were able to find somebody who really was going to be a better fit than I was at that point. And though it might have took them a little longer to find that person, ultimately it was best for me to leave. I had come up with I numerous ideas. I had been there. I had been down that road. It was actually a group that we were a part of with our kids. And I still purchase their fundraisers, and I still like and share their posts, and I still encourage others to do the same and participate in the group. But sometimes when we want to go, or at that point that board member is ready to leave and you all know, don't hang on, because it really could negatively impact what you are trying to do moving forward. Maybe they have suggestions of other board members, other people who could be board members. Allowing them to leave gracefully, you will ultimately show your appreciation for the time that they were with you and not have a quote unquote bad breakup that will leave a bad taste in their mouth. Take the steps that we talked about seriously. And I implore that you do not apologize for having expectations for your board members and to hold them accountable. If you don't take it seriously, why should anyone else? And lastly, be sure that you're assessing the board and members annually. So really use surveys, board matrices, any other tool you can find to actually hold yourselves accountable, to look at your board members, to evaluate, are they still continuing to bring that same level of contribution that they had intended for? Again, as a previous board member, being in a situation where I felt like a failure, there was just nothing more that I could do. And so I wanted to gracefully walk away from that with no hard feelings. They're doing an amazing job, and it was just time for someone else to step in. There's going to be lots of opportunities for you to look for recruitment options. Some of the ways that we recruit volunteers and board members currently is truly reaching out to our local businesses, asking if there are individuals who are interested in being on a board, utilizing some of those free websites to really get out there and post that you're looking for board members. But when you post those, be sure that you're listing the expectations for those board members. If I'm on the other side of that and I'm doing a search that I want to be a part of an organization, I most certainly want to know that that organization has all of their ducks in a row, that when I walk in, I want to feel like I'm making a difference. So with that, I'm just going to kind of open it up to other questions. Again, I know this was a recruitment and retention, but I hope that bringing full circle, you'll see how um, looking at your board and establishing all of those pieces and parts to your board will actually encourage people to want to be a part of that, to when they leave that board, to encourage others to become a part of it, that you take your job seriously and you want them to as well, that they're there for a purpose. Nobody wants to go and sit in an hour-long meeting once a month or 2-hour meetings once a month. I would also encourage you not to have 2-hour and 3-hour long meetings. Those are all really great ways to push those people out. So again, as I stated, I'm just going to kind of turn this over to Sydney. And, if anybody has any questions or anything, I will continue to stay on. And once again, thank you for allowing me to share what I've learned in my time. And I hope that you're able to take a few pieces away.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kathy. I know I have a couple questions and follow-ups, but I want to remind everyone, feel free to type your questions into the chat box or chime in, raise your hand, and we can unmute you and you can ask your questions. But I'll kick us off if that's okay. And I'll turn my camera on as well. So I loved your idea of kind of part, I guess, of the nominating committee's
Mhm.
job to find those people. But I do like also kind of maybe having a subcommittee of a recruitment committee, like to help out that nomination committee. What do you think about having applications for board members instead of you going to search for them, having an open application so people come to you? Have you ever experienced that before?
Yes, we actually do that quite frequently as well. Um, I feel like sometimes people are less likely to come to you only because they're not really sure what they're getting involved with. So again, if you're posting out there, applications are open, express what it is that you're looking for from those applicants, right? We want to still give them the idea of coming into an organization that we know what we want from them, right? And so that's why sometimes it's better to actually go out searching for those people, because you have kind of a preconceived notion of what it is that you're looking for. You know what your goals are, you know what you want to achieve, and sometimes it's looking at that and saying what characteristics, and it doesn't have to be a business person, it might be somebody who just is a huge advocate of your organization. Maybe they've utilized your services and they think it's amazing, and they can spread that word. Sometimes those are what you're looking for. So while it's great to have the application, I don't you should have that anyway. Regardless of whether you're looking or they're coming to you, having that application puts another layer on it, but truly expressing what is the ultimate goal of your board, gives them an idea of what they're signing up for.
Great. And I did have one other question. I know you talked about kind of expectations, which I know goes into the role descriptions and all that good stuff.
Mhm.
I've been on boards where we have to sign an agreement we will give annual donations. We will attend at least 3 of the 4 meetings throughout the year, and we actually have to sign that. And then the president or whoever kind of keeps track of all those expectations. And if I miss, only attend 2 of the 4 meetings, I get a warning, and then it's, hey, you're not meeting the requirements. We gotta get you out of here. Um, do you recommend that? Do you have any experience in that?
Whether it's that strict or not is going to be truly up to each organization. But I do think it is about holding people accountable. If you set those parameters up and they agree to that coming onto the board, sign it, review it annually, whatever needs to be done. I do think it's important that you hold them accountable. Make sure that they're making those meetings. But if they're not, maybe not be too quick to say, well, they just don't want to be here. What is it that they didn't, why didn't they attend? Well, I don't attend because the borings are meeting. more boring. We go over the same thing every month. You know, it's the treasurer report. We give a lowdown of XYZ, and it's the same thing every month. Make sure again that you're changing things up. That's a big piece of that retention, right? We want to change things up. We do want to have meaningful conversations about the things that are on our agendas. It's not just to have everybody sit in a meeting and talk at them. This should be an opportunity to really open that up for discussion and hear their ideas and things as well.
All right. As always, I've talked too much. So who else has questions for Kathy? I didn't see anything come into the chat box, so please feel free to unmute yourself. Or if you have a certain situation, we're going to try and keep it, as confidential as possible, so no names, but, situations that you may want to talk about and get some input from Kathy or anyone else who's on the webinar. If anyone would like to share, please feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand and I can unmute you.
Or if you have questions. Oops, I'm sorry.
Oh, yep. Go ahead, Joni.
I was just going to ask, I'm on a board of directors for Michael Dunn, and the same thing, I signed a thing saying that I would promise to give because, that was part of the deal. But the one thing I always, and it's very important to have somebody who's very knowledgeable about accounts and like a CPA, when we typically have a CPA or two. But I was wondering, where can you get, a lot of times it's hard to read the financial documents, and if there's any, way to, I guess you can, study it, but a way, you're on the board of directors, but you're not a CPA, but you want to understand those documents and know what you're looking at. So that's kind of my question is, how, I guess is there any, do you have any advice on that? How about that?
For me personally, I would really sit down with the whole board and say, is anyone else understanding this? And if not, then perhaps that CPA needs to break it down into layman's terms, right? We're not all CPAs. We don't read the same sheets. We don't even speak the same language sometimes. So really, I think it's just expressing that and saying like, I really, I think it'd be really great if we break it down into, pieces and parts that we can talk about individually.
Okay. Thank you.
I mean, short of going to school and learning everything, it's challenging. I mean, I even face that. I work in local government too, and our finance department, we get things back from them, and it's so confusing sometimes of what they're actually asking us or what we're actually looking at.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody
Is
else?
there anything else, if there's if somebody would share, I obviously feedback for me too. I'm looking for feedback as far as, giving the presentation today. I know I spoke a lot about the structure of boards, and I just, if there was something else that you were looking to get from today, please share. And so maybe I can comment on that as well.
We did have oh, go ahead. Yeah, you saw Lana's comment.
Yeah. How do you handle someone that their time has been served, but they really need to leave the board, but assumes they are wanted still and assume everyone wants them to stay? Sometimes I think that's an individual conversation with them, sitting down and saying that, and then really celebrating what they've done. So if you've come to that place where you can talk to them and say, boy, it's a tough conversation to have. Let's be real. It's a tough conversation to have, but it does need to happen. So by saying, something to the effect of, we've really appreciated having you on the board. Maybe this is somebody that's been super long term, and just saying we're looking to kind of turn things over a little bit. Do that in a way though that you can make a list, celebrate the things that they've done for your organization in previous years. I know sometimes it's a matter of aging, and then all of a sudden, that person who was great 10 years ago, hopefully we don't have them all that long, that your boards are turning over a little more frequently, but we tend to see sometimes that somebody will be on one board and then they'll flip over to another board and to another board. um, and so, at some point you do have to have the conversation to sit down and say, thank you so much for your time and all that you've given. But we are looking to, bring in new board members, asking if it's a time for them to go, and then really making that transition a good one, and really celebrating everything that they have done for you. And perhaps there's an opportunity, and I don't know, this is true with the individual you're thinking about, but perhaps it's an opportunity for them to help out in a different way. Just because maybe somebody's not on the board anymore doesn't mean that they can't be an advocate for you.
Kathy, if I can add to that, I'm kind of thinking about the term limits. Like if we have, it's in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, term limits are like a must. And once a term limit is over, there needs to be a policy where there's a gap of service. Just so you can kind of break that up a little bit and maybe avoid kind of what's going on in this situation. I've been on boards where you were allowed to have 2 3-year terms back to back, and then you were required to take a year off. And then after that year, you could be voted back on. So that could be a way, and of course, that's probably a bylaws change, which means you have to go to your board and get that approved, and then membership, and there's a long process in that. But that's something to possibly consider looking at your board and saying, hey, maybe we need to start looking at term limits to get some new, I don't want to say new blood because that sounds terrible, but and I'm being recorded. Great. Just to get some new perspectives into the organization.
I think that's a really good point, Sydney. And sometimes I feel like that was missed the first time around, and that's why it's so important as you create a board, or as you revisit what your board structure looks like. That's very important.
Yeah, so we had a comment come in, and then Jim, I'm going to get to your question and let you unmute yourself. So the comment that came in was regarding improving diversity of the boards. Do you have any suggestions on expanding beyond our own networks to recruit maybe more people of ages, race, ethnicity, things of that nature?
I think in our community, it works really well for us to connect with our university, with our schools. They tend to have an idea of different groups and places that we can go for outreach. Our university, we have several organizations and clubs on the university campus that we can reach out to and ask if there are people willing to come and commit to our boards. Through our city, we also have a diversity, equity, inclusion committee, and those groups sometimes tend to have other people outside of the network that you typically would be working with. So I would highly just suggest doing that. Even doing a search online for other organizations in your community, finding out who those are, and maybe it's working as a partnership with them to get to know some of the some of the members in those committees or organizations, and then maybe building off of that.
Great. Jim, you're up. Mike is yours.
I've got a question. I have a board member that's been on the board since 1978. And she loves to micromanage. And she is very politically influential in the city. And she has a lot of followers. How do I fix it? I've got 16 members on the board. The average age is probably close to 80. So I'm going to have to do some major restructuring, but it's kind of like a hot iron. You don't know if you want to touch it or just let it float.
I absolutely do know what you're talking about. And, like I said, we have had a few that, even with the term limits, even though we put term limits in place, they find another board that's just close enough to stay connected. Truly, I think it's really working with your board and committee to trying to do some restructuring. I feel like sometimes that may be the only way to do that kindly. This is a tough one, and if it's a matter of being influential, I don't know if you mean, in my world it would be, our mayor, our city manager, things of that nature that, sometimes they have connections with. Sometimes it's having conversations with those individuals also, letting them know, here we're at. I want to know that you're going to have my back if we do these things. If we start changing the structure, and that means that some of those individuals will no longer be on the board, you may need to have that conversation with some of those individuals as well, to get that support.
Well, what my past predecessors did is just added more people to the board so that they could try and get the overvote to get them voted out of the position of total power, because none of the directors would stay. They had a director turnover here. They'd last less than a year and disappear. So
yeah, that's a challenge and not a fix. Adding to your board is never a fix.
Well, I appreciate you guys' input, and I really understand what you're talking about, and I appreciate your comments. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Any other questions? This is great discussion. Okay. Well, while we're waiting for anyone else who's got any questions, I have a couple updates that I want to share with the group real quick while we have a little bit of time, and then we'll get back to Q&A if that's okay, Kathy. Sorry, I don't mean to just kind of take back over from you.
No problem.
So I know everyone probably already knows this, but next week kicks off National Volunteer Appreciation Week from April 16th to the 22nd. On Monday, the 17th, TCAD will be releasing our 2023 Volunteer Impact Report. So I pretty much have to thank everyone who is on this call right now because you all have contributed in one way or another to this report. It's a little bit of a spoiler, a little bit of a sneak peek. For this year's report, we've been able to report 10,070 volunteers who've helped 225,123 older adults through 452,899 hours of service in just a year. So I want to see some reactions. Like, come on. You can even verbalize reactions. There you go. Claps. Come on. Usually our group's a little more energetic. So you all will be getting that coming up on Monday. It's broken down into our programs that are statewide, and we also added a new section of special projects that some of our partners have contributed to. So we're growing the report every year. We get like 2 to 4 pages more. So it's really, really exciting to be able to release that. Becky, it looks like you have a question. So feel free to unmute yourself. Or maybe you're just giving some praise. Okay. I'll keep going then. Also next week, the independent sector, which is a nonprofit that helps release some statistical data, they should be releasing the new values of volunteer time. This year for Tennessee, for 2021, I should say, the value of a volunteer hour is $26.02, and then federally is $29.95. So typically, independent sector releases this report the same time as National Volunteer Appreciation Week, so hopefully I'll be able to share that with you all as well. Why is that important? A lot of us use that when we're applying for grants, showing the true value of our overall programs. It's not necessarily something that we shout out to the public, because to me, that's not really why we would publicize, like, hey, our volunteers contributed $13 million, woohoo! But it's more what funders want to hear, elected officials, anyone who wants to kind of contribute monetarily to the program, we want to kind of highlight that. Also, next month on May 11th is going to be our next session of the series, where we're going to talk about volunteer self-care. I heard Dr. Kristen Dillon speak at a conference in Pennsylvania, and she is a clinical geropsychologist. Sure, maybe I said that right. I don't know. We'll find out next month. In hospice and palliative care at the VA in Bedford, Virginia. So she was really interesting when I heard her speak. So she'll be able to give us some tips and tricks on some volunteer care, how volunteers can take care of themselves, how we can take care of volunteers, and then of course we can, I'm sure, relate that back to how to take care of ourselves as well. So those are all the updates that I have. Anybody have any other questions, comments about anything? Stories to share? Oh, thank you, Becky. Jim, go for it.
What did you say that was the volunteer prices again? It's 29 what for the federal, and what was the other one?
So for Tennessee, if you're funded, all your funding comes from Tennessee. So like you're funded through
Right.
the AAAD and things of that nature. It's $26.02 for 2021. We're going to
Okay.
get 2022 numbers hopefully next week. Federally, it's $29.95 for 2021.
All right. Thank you.
No problem. And when I get those numbers, it actually is a chart that shows a yearly progressions. So it goes all the way back to like 2005 or something like that.
Well, great. Thank you.
No problem. I have good resources every now and then, Jim. Alrighty, well, it doesn't look like we have any other questions, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Sometimes that sparks somebody to answer or ask a question because they don't want to be recorded. So thank you so much again, Kathy. We really appreciate your time, and I look forward to talking to you all next month.